Ice definitely.
All right, Eric, I think I'm ready. Go for it.
So I had the Switzerland National Bank. It was established in 1907. It serves the country in a couple of ways. Firstly, it states how it defines its price stability, and it bases its monetary policy on decisions on a medium-term inflation forecast, and it sets operational range for its chosen reference interest rate and 3-month LIBOR, which is the London Interbank Offered Rate. The Swiss bank is privately owned by cantons and canton banks. The rest is owned by private individuals. Canton is the administrative divisions of the country which manage themselves. It acts for interest of the country as a whole, and its primary goal is price stability along with economic growth. The Swiss National Bank has an exclusive right to issue banknotes and distribution of coins. The National Bank has 2 head offices, one in Bern and one in Zurich. It maintains 6 representative offices. In addition, it has 14 agencies operated by cantonal banks and serving the country's supply of money. The Bank Council oversees the controls that oversees and controls the conduct of business by national banks. It consists of 11 members. 6 members, including the president and vice president, are appointed by the Federal Council, and 5 by shareholders' meetings. The Bank Council sets up 4 committees from its own ranks: the Audit Committee, the Risk Committee, the Remuneration Committee, and the Appointment Committee. The Bank Council oversees and controls conduct of business by the Switzerland National Bank. The term of office of the members of the Bank Council is 4 years, and the full term of the office cannot exceed 12. The bank has meetings. The president at this moment is Thomas Jordan. The Switzerland National Bank informs the general public about its monetary policy decisions and balance sheet developments via press releases and media conferences, kind of like how we do, how the Fed does it. The currency of the Swiss franc is the Swiss franc. Inflation target rate is between 0 and 2%. The target range for interest rates, which is the LIBOR 3-month investment in Swiss franc, is negative 1.25 and negative 0.25. The inflation rate forecasted with the LIBOR at negative 0.75 at the end of the year for 2016 is negative 0.4. And that is where I got my information from, with the the Switzerland National Bank website. Does anybody have any questions?
It said at the top you had like 14 like different agencies. Do you know like what each of the agencies do, or are they just like?
There's a lot of different agencies. They're really specific. I saw some have like environment. Some have like. So there's like, I think they have like a couple, like 3 districts, and each of them have like 4 or 5 like different different agencies. I was going to pull up the chart, but it was really big. So those 14 agencies were separated into like districts of the.
Okay, we're gonna move on, because we're a little more tight on time, so allow a question or two, but thank you, Eric. No. Eric, you got your sheet.
Oh, yeah.
No, I don't want that. Okay, go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, so I had the Central Bank of Argentina. So some of the quick facts that it's also called the BCRA, which is in Portuguese, so it's not going to pronounce it. It was established in May 28th, 1935. The current president right now is Federico Stumpfnagel. He was just promoted. They just got rid of the old president. Not really terms on them. He was just corruption was kind of one of the big things that was part of him. So they just elected a new one. And then the currency is the Argentinian peso. So kind of the system of the central bank, it's ran by a governor, also known as the president. And then it's followed by two deputy governors who are kind of, it said that they're just assistants pretty much to the governor. And then there's 8 directors who all sit on a board together and they kind of vote over overall principles and processes. So the head governor is in charge of the main affairs with third parties. And then also leadership positions, I thought this was interesting that they're all appointed. None of them are elected by anybody. So essentially the executive branch of Argentina controls the banking system as they're all appointed by the leader of Argentina. So a little bit of corruption came from there, and that's kind of what got them in the problem the last time. So what they do is they conduct monetary policy through the interest rate and short term as their main interest. They also release annual, monthly, and weekly reports on their website to kind of just show the evaluation of where their bank system is now. Another thing they do is they mandate the monetary policy, focusing on the stability and price stability inside of Argentina. And another thing I thought they did was that was interesting. They managed the liquidity by repo transactions, buying and selling securities, and auctions of bills and notes. So something that's not really seen as often on the central bank. And then there was actually a Wall Street Journal article recently about Argentina. It was in April of this year, and it said that their inflation has now surpassed the 38% mark. I looked it up today; it's at 40%, and that says that their goal is to cut this to just to 5% by 2019, and kind of their target is to lower it by 12 to 17% just by the end of next year, 12%, and then eventually get to that 5% by 2019. He's recorded saying in this article that the only thing that will fix their economy is lowering this inflation rate, as it's the main problem of all their main problems. Another problem that they talked about is the quantity of money and just how the interest rate is staying about 38%. And then there was a CEO at the end of the article that kind of explained that the only way to kind of lower this inflation rate will depend on how the government responds with its fiscal program. So that's pretty much it. Those are sources. Any questions?
When did the inflation start to rise?
It's been this way for a long time, but like the worst it's been is just the last like 5 years. And like I said, the last president said the corruption kind of pushed it up to this height.
What are repo transactions?
Repo transactions, from what I understand, are just like when you buy and sell a car, kind of like, and then they just don't pay you back. So.
I got the final question for you.
Yeah.
How did they propose they're going to lower the interest rate? You mentioned the fiscal. I didn't quite get that last bullet, but they were saying there that depending on how.
That's just a corporate CEO that contains a lot of stock in the Argentina Central Bank. He was saying that the only way that he thinks that it will be lowered is by this program with fiscal programming. But what the president was noted saying was that they have to lower interest rates.
Okay. And independence isn't so good there, I think, correct? Yeah. So it's a combination of
Independent.
the fiscal policy is really, oh, we need some more stuff, we should spend some money, we don't have any money, I got an idea, let's run the printing press.
Right,
I think
because-
it's kind of how it works.
Well, exactly, because like I said, like they're all appointed, so
Yeah.
they have all the power in just the one system, so there's no balance.
Right. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Friendships.
Okay, go ahead.
So I had the European Central Bank, and I kind of looked at 3 different things, like the history, what's going on there currently, and then what's going on with them in the news. So their history, in 1988, the European Council started working towards bringing economic and monetary union in Europe. And then they kind of went through 3 stages of setting up the Eurozone, like we know it today, the ECB. So stage 1 was from 1990 to 1993, and they're basically uniting the countries, and they increased cooperation between central banks. They started the free use of the European currency unit, the ECU, which was the forerunner to the euro. And then in stage 2, they continued unification of the countries, and they laid some groundwork to basically make everything run really smooth when they transferred over to the euro and established the ECB. And it was on June 1st in 1998 that the European Central Bank, the ECB, was established. And then the 3rd stage, from like 1999 to the present, the central bank kept working with exchange rates, and they were setting the single monetary policy for the Eurozone, and then they were adding some new members for a while until like their biggest challenge was just like getting those countries' central banks like worked into the Eurozone system. So currently they're located, the TV is located in Frankfurt, Germany. The president is Mario Draghi, the vice president is Victor Constantino. Their mission statement, I looked it up, it looked more like a mission paragraph than a mission statement, but it basically came down to 2 points. They really care about price stability and keeping the value of the euro like safe. Currently, unemployment rate in the Eurozone is over 10%, and the ECB is holding their target inflation rate below but close to 2. But right now, the actual inflation rate is 0.4%, and that was just last month. They're holding their benchmark, their refinancing rate at 0%, and a deposit rate of negative 0.04%. So banks literally have to pay money to keep reserves with them right now. And then their lending rate is 0.25%, and they have 19 countries right now working with them. So in the news, Brexit was the big one. In June, Britain, voted to leave the European Union, which caused stock markets to initially plunge, and then they kind of stabilized a little bit. But right now, like, everyone's like, what's going to happen? And it hasn't really affected the ECB like directly yet, but everyone's kind of just waiting to see what's going to happen still. And then their monetary policy of just the negative deposit rates, quantitative easing. So the bank is just buying tons and tons of bonds right now, putting more money out into circulation, trying to get people to spend and trying to get banks to lend money out for people. That also goes with cheap money for banks. They're just creating incentives for the banks to lend money to try to stimulate the economy. And like their biggest complaint is like they're doing as much as they can as a central bank, and they need the government to increase government to help out the economy. All right, any questions?
How did they get the deposit rate to be positive?
I'm pretty sure like that's something that they set, and they're just setting it at a negative rate right now to like, because like I said, with it being negative, banks pay to keep reserves at the central bank, and so like they're doing that as an incentive to the banks to lend more money to people so that hopefully they'll spend it and get the economy going here.
why price stability? Why do you think under this particular central bank, price stability would be really important over like dual mandate that the Federal Reserve has?
I think because it covers such a large area in so many countries, it's impacting a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of the whole thing is being able to cross country work.
So the dual mandate of the Fed, we covered that last time. What was that? Price stability, and then what else? What else did you hear about? Okay, I think we had it. Yeah, unemployment, right, which is kind of related to GDP. But in the ECB's case, how many countries are in there, Chisholm?
19.
So whose unemployment do we care about?
All of them.
Right? So can we really monitor all of them? Is there something that they can do for one and not the other? And it kind of creates this tangled, everybody went, right? Chisholm was the last one. It kind of creates this tangled web because of domestic policy and monetary policy. There's no one domestic policy that would work. So we'll see that as we get into a little bit deeper here into the interrelationship of fiscal and monetary policy. Yeah.
So is that the investment rate when it's like a negative? Is that so you won't lose money by just keeping it?
No, the negative rate, as Chisholm said, means that the bank has to pay the central bank money to keep their money there.
But if they were to hold it, would they lose more money because of the inflation rate?
No, if they were to just hold their, holding their own currency is part of their reserves. So that's still going to be counted as negative. The money that they don't lend out ends up counting against them, basically. And so they're trying to give them an encouragement to get it out the door. But this is kind of unprecedented territory. We'll see what implications this has, because they're not the only central bank that's pursuing negative interest. Who did Japan? Japan was our other. Somebody did Japan, right? Yeah.
They tried it, but the banks were playing.
Yeah, they pulled back.
They pulled it off.
Yeah.
After a while.
Joe?
Negative interest rate. Do they still have to keep reserves at the central bank?
Yeah. So that's what's kind of funny. They're actually reserved. I don't know exactly the details. I tried to figure this out before. I think that they only pay the negative interest on the amount above the required reserves. That's part of what we're going to get in today on that detail, but I am not even 100% sure of that, because otherwise it's just a straight tax, right? So you remember what required reserves are. It says, or the central bank says, you have to hold 10% of your money with me. So you got $100 million, 10 million has to be held back with the bank. And then on top of that, you have to pay me interest for me holding your money. It's kind of what they're doing. But I believe what it is it's on the incremental amount above your required reserves. And that's kind of the topic we're going to get into today. So I won't say much more. I'll bring it up as we bring up some other things. But other questions? All right, so let me mention the test real quick here before we get carried away into chapter 17. So you might have saw that I extended the due date. I was actually planning to do that regardless of this test coming up on Monday. So chapter 17 has been basically moved ahead to Sunday, if you hadn't seen that already, or the following weekend. So you don't have that. I did send out the Wall Street Journal stuff. So yeah, I think for studying for the test, if you did real well on the test because you did really well and you studied well, I'm not going to ask any tougher questions. I don't think. It's all stuff that I think you should have pulled away from those chapters. So you can study the same materials, the study plan materials. There's practice tests on my Econ Lab if you want to study that way. But multiple choice, equal parts from those chapters I sent out, and it'll be in class here. So, does anybody have any questions about that?
Who's favorite chapters are you in?
3 through 5, 8, 9. I think that's right. Is that right? 8? No, that's not right. 3 through 5, 9, 11, and 16. Yeah.
Yeah, formula sheet. That's it.
Yeah, so I sent that email out to everybody. So formula sheet, and bring a calculator, no phones. I will have some plain Jane calculators if you want, but no phones. So bring a calculator of your own if you want that. Your formula sheet can only have formulas, which means it's got an equal sign. There's something on the left-hand side, and there's something on the right-hand side. And it usually has a plus sign or minus sign or division and acronyms. So no definitions, no words, no nothing. Nothing but really straight equations or formulas. Okay? Questions on that? All right. Anything else?
Approximately how many questions are it going to be?
It'll probably just be, I haven't totally finished it all out, but I'm thinking around 30-ish. Up to, I don't think I'd want to ask more than 40. Just to make sure we can get it done. All right, anything else?
Other questions?
Multiple choice, all multiple choice. All right, so then we'll take in some new data and see how reliable the old data was. So I'm just all into data collection. So data collection, data evaluation. This is econ class after all. So So yeah, these presentations took a little bit longer than I was anticipating. Oh, I know what I wanted to say about the presentations. So general comments. Purpose of a verbal presentation is to be a presentation. So probably number one is when you practice for these things, don't read. For the most part, you can read a little bit. I don't mean you can't, but if you're pretty much reading what your bullets are, you're missing the point of the thing. I really want this to be a verbal presentation. So Chisholm, to give you a little kudos, you had a nice clean bullets. Eric, you struggled on that a little bit. And it just takes practice. None of this is going to kill your guys' grades. That's why I don't mind showing. But let's look at Eric. You were Switzerland, right?
Yes.
So think about this when you're presenting, because it might force you to. Here's Chisholm's. Here's Eric's. Now, I actually don't have a problem with Eric's being like this. I'm okay with it. I think Chisholm's method is a little better. Hers could have maybe even had a little bit more detail. But if Eric comes up here, puts this up here, and then just speaks about it, maybe peeks at a little bit about the topic just as a reminder, that's fine. That's a good way to make a presentation. I like to see eye contact, good verbal to the crowd. But what's the potential drawback if you do it this way and you're making a presentation? People are just going to sit there and read. So whatever you're saying, they're just kind of reading. And so, but it's even worse to just read it only. So again, this is not to just call, you weren't the only one, but you just happened to go, both you two just happened to go. So I made comments on your sheets if you were reading. I put something like don't read or don't just read or reading too much or something like that. Because many of you were guilty of that. And I think it might be helpful for you to go back to the recording and actually look at yourself and kind of think about how I'm presenting myself to the class. What did I wear that day? Was that the best thing to put up? Now, almost none of you thought of that. I don't expect you to get all dressed up, but, think about that. When I go, I tell you what, I put this on today. I think about that when I dress. Today, there's a lot of alumni around, and so I kind of wanted to show that I was, Ottawa, we don't have the nameplate. Kaylee's been participating in some of the business meetings, but if I happen to stumble into some alumni, I kind of thought about how I would be presented to them. So I usually dress kind of like this once in a while. Those of you who've seen me over the summer, I'll come in shorts and sometimes a t-shirt and sandals, and today would not be the day for me to do that, right? So If you have some of those presentation days, just kind of think about the way you're dressed. It might not be a big deal, and think about what your presentation is going to look like to those that are here, and see if you can make a couple polishing items. So, questions or comments on that? That's kind of my general overview for you guys as you think about those presentations in the future, whether it's my class or somebody else's. Okay. Oh, I did write down another thing. The names. A lot of you tried to, and some of you, I thought, Jacob, I think you were pretty good at Mr. M or whatever, and kind of adds a little likeness to the thing. So that's fine, but I was more concerned about, again, having it on the bullet is perfect. So president, what do you get? You had some crazy ones up here, didn't you? Where was that?
Thomas Jordan.
Yeah, Thomas Jordan. So you might say something like your bullet might say Thomas Jordan, even though his name is pronounceable. But even if it is pronounceable, you might skip that and just say you have the bullet here, and then say the president's duties are this. Like, what does the president do? How are they? Why are they important? Right? So you've listed the president, and then when you come to it in your talk, you might say, the president's role with the monetary policy, they meet about every 6 weeks, and the president gives guidance on what they think is important about monetary policy, right? So you're kind of talking about the president's duty, not even bothering to say who they are. Again, the reader can see that. So think about your presentation being interwoven together with the printed material that's up here, rather than what's there I have to say, or vice versa, okay? All right, any other questions there, comments? All righty, let's switch over to this one. I don't want to forget these. Okay, so this chapter, this chapter we get into some more about the money supply. Actually, I don't want that. That could go there, I guess. Oops, not chapter 4. Chapter 7. All right. Okay, so this chapter, there we go. This chapter is going to look closer at money supply and the details of it. We've mentioned the 3 tools of the Fed before, and we mentioned them earlier today already. Required ratio, what was the other 2 tools? Open market operations, open market sale, open market purchase, and the discount rate, the interest rate, right? So those were the 3 things. And so these are the players in that system. The banks who are making the loans, and the depositors, and the central bank that pulls the strings, in our case, the Fed. All right, so the Fed's balance sheet, the central bank's balance sheet. Their liabilities are the currency notes in circulation. So they issue them, they print them off. Some of those governments that don't have independence between monetary and fiscal policy, that's how they pay for stuff. Oh, we need to go buy something. Oh, that was easy. Let's go buy it with this. And so that was Argentina. That's part of their problem. And some of the other hyperinflation countries, who had Zimbabwe, or yeah, somebody, Mitch, you had Zimbabwe, and then the Congo was another issue with that, right? So there's lots of countries out there that don't have this independence, and that's the problem that they run into, because these end up being their liabilities. All right, and then they have assets. Through their open market operations especially, they're going to buy those bonds from Obama and take them off of Wall Street. So if that bond is in circulation, let's see, where's my old bond here? There it is. So this was the whole bonds out in Wall Street, right? Being circulated around. And so I go do an open market purchase, and now Janet Yellen's holding the bond. Janet is entitled to the interest as well as the principal once the bond comes due. And so that is their primary way of altering the interest or the supply of money, and creates an asset for the Fed. Okay, so that's our balance sheet for the Fed. So we haven't talked as much about the monetary base. So the monetary base, they call it the base because it really supports the whole money system, all the money supply. And so currency in circulation, what does that mean? Where is this currency? Is this one right here in my dirty little hands? Is this one part of this?
Yeah.
Yes. When is it not part of that? When it's a savings account, not really. It's kind of transformed. But and I want to be careful because I'm not being maybe perfectly clear. When is this piece of paper not this? Under your mattress? No. It is still out there. So whether it's in my dirty hand, in my dirty wallet, or in my dirty mattress, it's all technically, let's not have a visual on that, but I might need to wash the sheets here when I get home. All of those are currency in circulation. When is it not? When is this piece of paper not in circulation? When the Fed retires it, yes. So if that's one example, that's kind of actually more of a rare example. When the Fed retires it or brings it, if Janet's holding it, it's not in circulation, yes. But there's another more common way when it's not in circulation. Where might I put this thing today? Where might a person start besides their mattress, their wallet? Where might this end up? Might end up at Walmart, right? But if I wanted to keep it for tomorrow and not put it in my mattress, not in my wallet, where would I put it? This is not. I'm not really going very far with this, am I? And the reason is kind of I kind of maybe screwed up when Jacob said his deposit. So if let me go back to you and say yes, let's run with that. If I go and make a deposit, where is this thing sitting? At the bank, right? So that is not in circulation, and that's where this is getting kind of weird because I'm talking about this piece of paper. But so you're right. When this goes into the bank, it's part of vault cash, and it's not in circulation. So the Federal Reserve takes note of that because now they have currency at the bank, and they have a deposit at the bank in my name. At that instant, I have a savings deposit of 20, and the bank is holding a piece of paper of 20, right? Now, they don't like to do that for very long because that's not how they make money. How do they make money? They loan it out. So that's when Paige comes, gets a loan, and it leaves the bank again. Now she runs to Walmart, buys some stuff, right? That's the currency in circulation. So anyway, the point I'm trying to drive home is that in circulation means not in banks. Not in the central bank, but also not in banks. So currency that is in circulation. All right, and then we've got reserves in the banking system, R, and reserves end up being a combination of excess reserves and required reserves. So we're going to do maybe a lot of formulas. We'll see how far we get today. Boy, I'm out of ink on multiple parts here. I need my blue. Get my baby blues back. All right. So if there's an open market purchase from a bank, these debit and credit things I hate, by the way. I'm going to lean on you accounting people. Who's my accounting people? Jennifer, Tag, Dallas, Logan. I got lots of them in here. So you guys get to help here. All right. So what's going on here is that Janet now is buying a bond from the bank of Jacob. Jacob State Bank, right? So that's what we're tracking through here of what's going on with that thing. So Jacob State Bank sells the bond to Janet. Janet puts this here. What happens, right? So we have reserves going up by 100, and therefore the monetary base has increased by 100. Monetary base was what formula? MB equals C plus R. So now Jacob State Bank has 100 in reserves. Open market purchase from a non-bank public. Non-bank public. So now we go to the non-bank public of Paige here. So Janet goes, buys it. Paige has got the money. What does she do with it? Puts it on account somewhere. Now she might run to Jacob State Bank and open up a checking account, right? So we're right. You don't trust Jacob State Bank. There's been a few bank runs, a little not so trustworthy, but all right. So she puts her bank on her money on account at Jacob State Bank, and so the end result is the same in terms of the amount of reserves that are being created. Just kind of recapping that. All right, so all they're trying to point out here is it doesn't matter who Janet buys it from, if she buys it from a bank or from a non-bank entity, the monetary base is going to increase by that amount. Yes, that's when she's buying the bonds, open market. And so the real deal here is the effect of an open market purchase is going to depend on where currency is held. So if Paige took it and only put $10 on reserve with Jacob and holds $10 currency, that's a material difference. That's a difference there. So depends on whether things are being held as full deposits or being held as currency. That is going to make an impact on it. And we'll see that come up here in a second. So open market sale, we're just undoing it, reduces the monetary base, currency comes out. I'm not even going to give you the visual this time. I take the money, the bond goes back out there, and undoes the system. So we got the Federal Reserve being tracked down here with reserves in circulation, and what's going up with the non-bank and the banking public. All right, other factors that affect the base, the float. Do you guys even know what the float is? And I'm being kind of honest, not because you might be a little slow or because you're young, but it's almost obsolete now. It's becoming close to being obsolete. The float. Everybody knew what the float was back in probably 30 years ago, even somewhat before my time, but certainly 30 years ago. It's the amount of time it takes a check to process. So if I write a check to Jacob, Jacob goes to his bank and deposits it. In the old days, that check might take 7 days to process. And so I could play the float. Russ could be a gambler and cut a check to Jacob that's no good, as long as I make it good before the 7 days comes up, right? Playing the float. So as long as the check doesn't clear the two banks, then I have an opportunity to make good on the check sometime in between. But as technology and innovation have increased, the float has gotten lower, 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 and we're almost into real-time data now for most checks even, right? If you go write a check at Walmart, they take it and they enter in your code, and it's just like running a debit card, right? So the float is almost non-existent now, but that's, if you see that word in the textbook and that's what that means. Yeah.
So like when I go to deposit check in my bank, they can only give me $100 of it until the rest clears. That takes a couple of days. So
That's right. That would be part of the float. Yeah, yep. That's part of. Yep, that's the float. And usually a couple days, and it might actually clear faster, but they tell you 2 days or 3 days before you can get the rest of the money down. Yep. All right. So foreign exchange market that can control places like China, as Trump would say, holding all of our currency. A couple of you had countries. Ecuador is one of, nobody did Ecuador, I don't think, right? I think Ecuador is one that uses the dollar interchangeably. Like you will find dollars down there or their currency, and it's a one-to-one peg. So they're actually using our currency as their currency in a different country. And that's what was happening also in Zimbabwe before too. They would start to use dollar currencies because it actually held its value. It actually played the role of money. And so people started using that currency. And so that can, that's not really even what they're talking about here. This is more with China doing foreign exchange purchases with the central bank. But yes.
How does Ecuador and Zimbabwe using our dollar affect us? Is it considered still in circulation?
It's definitely considered in circulation because frankly, they don't know where or how much is out there, right? They just know that the money supply is that at that level. But they honestly don't know if it's in Indiana or Ecuador, right? So from our standpoint, we have money that is out there and increasing the supply of money, but it's not being used for domestic transactions. So it still would tend to potentially impact interest rates with cheapening things, but it would take longer. Imagine. So the old rule of thumb is if the money supply increased by 10%, then our price level would increase by 10% in the long run. We'll learn a little bit more but we did this in macro class with the quantity theory of money. But imagine if we increased by 10%, but half of that increase went to Ecuador or something because they're using it. Then our prices, that there's not strong trade ties or something between Ecuador and United States, all that money went to them to use. None of it's going to affect our price level, right? There's not domestic people that are being flooded with money, and so you won't have the same price impact if you have currency leaving like that. But that's all a small fraction relative to our total money supply. But in theory, that could be an effect. Yeah.
So does their government hire money, or how does it?
People. Most of that starts off with people just using it. Like buyers and sellers are like, oh, Zimbabwe dollar, we don't take those, we just use them as toilet paper. Oh, but you've got American dollars. Yeah, we take American dollars. And so then they just start using it because it's maintaining its value. And so literally, it'd be kind of like in prison using cigarettes as money, right? It's whatever has value that'll maintain its value, that'll help facilitate trade. And so as long as they have faith that the American dollar is going to remain solid, then that works out for them. What happened with some of your central banks where they were doing the currency swap or the pegging, you had that, right? What was your bank again? Kazakhstan. They'll say, oh, but Kazakhstan, I don't know what my interpretation of Kazakhstan would be. Was that close to a Russianish type of voice? Will be 20 to $1. $1 equals 20 Kazakhstan dollars or whatever. And in theory, that would keep their inflation rate fixed to the United States inflation rate. But the problem is the people don't trust that. And the government usually reneges on that. And so they start still printing off more Kazakhstan dollars because they have to pay for their spending that they didn't collect enough tax dollars for. And it eventually breaks down. And so then the exchange rate isn't there. And so it's actually more credible. Why it worked in Ecuador is because they're actually using US dollars. So the Ecuadorian government couldn't fabricate these, right? They were actually using our currency. That's different than pegging or fixing the currency to one another. Because I don't think Kazakhstan was probably actually using dollars. I don't know that for sure, but so that's kind of a distinction. Yeah?
Has another central bank ever like counterfeited US dollars?
Oh, I would hope not, but I wouldn't doubt it. Not a central bank. No, I think I would have heard that one. So I think I can pretty confidently say no. What And not been caught. Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, some of those governments, it's possible, but not any cases that I'm aware of. All right. So this next distinction is going to bring in something with reserves related to Fed. And so the monetary base can be thought of as this MBN plus BR, right? So non-borrowed monetary base and borrowings of the monetary base. So that formula can be thought of to be, if we just do the little algebra there, the non-borrowed monetary base plus the borrowed reserves. And so the distinction here is the amount of reserves that were borrowed from the Fed at the discount rate. So the Fed cannot determine the amount of borrowing by the banks from the Fed, and so but they do know what it is. They do know what that number is. All right, so how does money get created? So I'm going to kind of skip through this. In macro class, I took you through the idea of Paige gets a loan, goes and buys a TV from Best Buy. Best Buy pays their employees, and they put their paycheck in the bank at Wells Fargo. Jacob comes to buy a car from Wells Fargo, the loan, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So that's the process that we're going through here with the deposit multiplier in tracking how loans get formulated. All right, so Bank A, $100 goes in, required reserve ratio 10%. They can make loans of 90. That $90 ultimately ends up in a deposit. $9 gets held back, 10% required reserves, $81 can be loaned out. Right? So we got all these balance sheet maneuvers between A to Bank B to Bank C to D. And so there's initially a $100 change, which then turns into 90, 81, 72. These are all the loans. And so those loans end up in somebody else's checking account. And so remember, M1 is currency plus checking account deposits, right? So we have currency in circulation still, but we've created these additional deposits of 1,000. And so the deposit multiplier in its simplest form is 10. $100 turned into 1,000. I should kind of do it down here. So the increase in reserves went from 100 to, the reserves remain the same at 100, but those reserves are supporting 1,000 million, I guess, in deposits. So deposits create additional money because of the loaning process. And if there's a bank run on the bank, not all the money's there, right? Because it's been loaned out. That was our principle with why some of the banks have failed. All right, we're going to stop there. We're going to pick up with some math on, well, I guess it might end up being Wednesday now, it sounds like.
Hey, Ralph.
Yes.
First thing, what I want to do with you sometime next week
Trying to summon on rolls, I already bought one.
about my academics.
Oh, okay.
That's my next question, but refer to the first question.
I got the first question. I put them out of order. Yeah. What time do you want? Tuesday work?
Tuesday 11, or is that too
Yeah.
early?
Actually, I'm a lot more open. I forgot I'm not doing micro. Like Monday, 11 to 11ish. I think I have somebody already. But...
I work Monday at 11. So.
Okay.
But Tuesdays and Thursdays are really open. If you're available at those times.
All right. Let me see.
Quick question. Do you know what time we'll be back from the Fed?
Ooh, that's coming up soon too.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks from now. That's about 2 weeks from now.
Like a week
November,
and a
I think it was the
half,
first week in November.
2nd?
it'll still be in the afternoon, like,
I just,
could be back real early, like, I think our tour's at
well, I'll be back by 4.
1:30. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all I need to know.
All right, let me see a page here. Someone.
Go to your meeting, be free.
Oh, and I'm doing that, well, I don't think that'll work. I'm doing that lunch at my house on Tuesday. So,
Not Thursday.
you said Monday was no good for you?
No, that's like.
What, and Wednesday?
Same schedule. I'm
Well,
available.
what is your availability on Monday and Wednesdays?
10 to 11 and
10's fine.
10 on
Yeah.
Monday?
Yeah.
Perfect. The 24th, correct?
Page, yes. Yeah, my phone doesn't have.
Only if you buy a smart.
Not that deal, I'm
I haven't
sorry.
even sold any of mine yet.
I just thought.
Paige, what's your phone number?
720
Uh,
720
238
238.
2970.
But
They
still,
bought
I'm paying for
them
still.
for 3. So,
No,
how about the markup on that? Then maybe at 20.